I never thought one dinner could change the way I saw everything, but that night did. My name is Daniel Hayes, and for most of my life, I believed being a good father meant saying yes. Yes to the bills, yes to the late-night calls, yes to the endless requests that drained me piece by piece. When my wife passed away 10 years ago, I promised myself I'd fill every gap in my children's lives, even if it killed me. I thought that was love. Sacrifice until there's nothing left of you, and then sacrifice a little more. Ethan was 28 now, Sophie 25, both with bright minds, big dreams, and, as I would later realize, very little sense of consequence. Ethan had a habit of launching businesses that went nowhere, and each one needed capital, my capital. Sophie, sweet and creative, had moved out as soon as she graduated but never seemed to have enough to pay her bills. Rent issues, car trouble, credit card debt, they came to me for all of it. And for years I gave. I always gave. That night, I wanted something different. I'd spent the whole afternoon cooking roast beef with rosemary, mashed potatoes the way my wife used to make, green beans sautéed with garlic, and a chocolate cake I hadn't baked since Sophie was 10. I set the table the way we used to when the kids were little. Polished silverware, folded napkins, wine glasses. It looked like something out of an old family album, the kind where people are smiling for real, not just because someone said, "Say cheese." The doorbell rang just as I lit the candles. "Hey, Dad," Sophie said, walking in first. She was dressed beautifully, as she always was, scrolling on her phone, her thumbs moving faster than I could follow. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, but didn't look up from whatever she was typing. Ethan followed, yawning, his earbuds dangling from his neck. "Smells good," he said, heading straight for the table. I smiled, pushing back the nagging voice in my head telling me this wasn't how it used to be. "Dinner's ready." We sat down, and for a moment, I let myself pretend. I listened to them talk about work, about their friends, about plans for the weekend. I nodded and laughed when it felt appropriate, but there was something missing. There had been something missing for years, though I hadn't wanted to admit it. Halfway through dinner, Sophie casually looked up and said, "By the way, Dad, can you transfer me some money tomorrow? My roommate bailed, and I'm short on rent again. Just until next month." Ethan jumped in right after. "And my car's acting up again. It's making that grinding noise, and I can't afford a mechanic right now. Can you call your guy? And, maybe cover it if it's a big fix?" "No," I said. It was one word, but it landed like a brick on glass. The room fell silent. "What?" Ethan frowned. I said no. My voice was steady, but inside I could feel my pulse spiking. Sophie blinked. "Dad, what are you talking about? You've always helped us." "That's the problem," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I've helped so much that you've stopped helping yourselves. You only call when something's wrong. You only visit when you need something. And I let it happen because I was scared. Scared that if I stopped fixing everything, I'd lose you both." Ethan scoffed and shook his head. "So what? You're just cutting us off? Now? After everything we've been through?" I looked at him, then at Sophie. For years, I would have folded right there, pulled out my phone, transferred the money, made the calls. But not this time. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: clarity. "I'm not abandoning you," I said. "I'm giving you a chance to grow up." The rest of dinner was quiet. They picked at their food. I barely tasted mine. The air was thick with shock and confusion, and I couldn't tell if it was theirs or mine. When dessert came, no one touched it. When they finally left, Sophie annoyed, Ethan sulking, I stayed at the table, staring at the plates. My hands trembled a little, not from fear, but from release. For years, I had been holding my breath, waiting for them to see me, to thank me, to care. And that night, I finally exhaled. I thought I'd feel guilty, but what I felt was free. After they left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the quiet kitchen. The house had always felt too big since my wife passed, but that night it felt different, less like an empty space and more like a blank canvas. I walked into the living room and noticed a photo on the mantel. The four of us on a camping trip years ago, me holding Ethan on my shoulders while Sophie hugged her mother's waist. Everyone was smiling, not the forced kind of smile you do for a camera, but real, deep, pure joy. I stood there, staring at it, and asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. When did it all change? And now, here I was, 58 years old, alone in a quiet house, finally realizing that all I had done was teach them to lean so hard on me that they never learned how to stand on their own. I slept better that night than I had in years. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the relief of finally breaking a cycle I had been too scared to touch. But one thing was clear. Things had to change. Not just for them, but for me too. This was not the end of my relationship with my kids. It was the beginning of a new one. One where I wasn't their crutch, but their father again. One where I could live my life not as a fixer, but as a man. I woke up the next morning, expecting silence, maybe even relief, from finally saying what I should have said years ago. Instead, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. 3 missed calls from Sophie, 2 from Ethan, a handful of texts, some long, some frighteningly short. Sophie, I can't believe you did that to us. Ethan, really, Dad? After everything? Unreal. Sophie, you've changed. Mom would be ashamed. That last one stopped me cold. I stared at it for a long time, letting the words burn into me. Mom would be ashamed. I almost called back, almost apologized like I had 100 times before, but something inside me stopped me cold. No, I said out loud, tossing the phone onto the counter. Not this time. I brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and waited for the guilt to take over. It always did, in the past. Every time I said no, even for something small, I'd spend the next few hours in an emotional tailspin until I inevitably gave in. But this time felt different. I sipped my coffee slowly, savoring the bitter taste as though it were proof of my new resolve. They need to be mad, I told myself. They need to feel this, because they need to change. Still, I couldn't deny the ache in my chest. These were my kids. The same ones who used to run into my arms when I came home from work, who used to crawl into bed when thunderstorms scared them. I raised them to believe they were loved and safe, but somewhere along the way, safe turned into dependent, and love turned into entitlement. I didn't blame them entirely. I had built that world for them, and now I had torn it down in one dinner. Around noon, Sophie showed up at my house unannounced. She didn't even knock. She just walked in, face flushed with anger. "Are you serious about last night?" she demanded. I set my coffee down. "Good morning to you too." "Don't joke, Dad. Are you really cutting us off? Just like that?" I stood, steadying myself. "I'm not cutting you off emotionally, Sophie. I'm cutting off the endless bailouts. I can't keep fixing everything for you. It's not helping either of us." Her eyes glistened with something between anger and hurt. "So what? You want me to just fail? End up homeless?" I sighed. "No. I want you to succeed without me carrying you. You're stronger than you think, Sophie. But you'll never know it if I keep catching you every time you stumble." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Mom wouldn't have done this." I felt that one like a gut punch. "Maybe not, but your mom was better at boundaries than I ever was. You just don't remember it because I erased those boundaries after she passed." Sophie didn't reply. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, the slam of the door echoing in the quiet house. 2 hours later, Ethan called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I needed to. "You really doing this?" he asked flatly. "Yes," I said. "I'm done being your safety net." A pause, then laughter, sharp and humorless. "You think you're teaching us some lesson? This is pathetic, Dad. You owe us after everything we've been through." "I don't owe you adulthood, Ethan. That's yours to earn." There was silence on the line. Then he muttered, "You're unbelievable," and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time before setting it down, my hands trembling. I had expected anger, yes, maybe even yelling. But entitlement? That cut deeper than I was ready for. That evening, I sat in the living room, staring at a blank television screen. For the first time in years, I had nothing to do, no bills to pay for someone else, no favors to call in, no problems to solve. It was unsettling. I walked to my study and opened an old drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were remnants of a life I had put on hold. My camera, the one I used to take hiking photos with, my unfinished manuscript, still tucked neatly into a folder, and an envelope labeled Retirement Travel Fund. I had built a life around fixing everyone else's issues, but what about me? For the first time in a decade, I asked myself, what do I want? The answer didn't come right away, but I knew one thing. Whatever it was, it wouldn't involve cleaning up after Ethan and Sophie forever. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Sophie. "If you don't help me, I'm done. Don't call me again." And another from Ethan. "You're dead to me until you fix this." I stared at the words, waiting for the usual flood of panic and guilt. It didn't come. Not fully. There was sadness. Yes, a deep, aching sadness, but also relief. For years, I had feared this exact moment. convinced that if I stopped giving, I'd lose them. And maybe I had, at least for now. But if I lost them because I stopped enabling them, maybe I hadn't really had them to begin with. I poured myself another glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the sunset. The quiet no longer felt so empty. It felt like space. Space I had earned. Space I could finally fill with something for me. And as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, I whispered to myself, this is the start, not the end. It's funny how quiet can be deafening. 3 days had passed since Sophie stormed out of my house, and Ethan hung up on me. In those 72 hours, I had received no calls, no texts, not even the kind of passive-aggressive emoji Sophie liked to send when she was too mad to talk. Nothing. It was the longest silence I had ever experienced from my kids, and at first it felt like punishment. But then I realized something. It was also peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to frantic messages about late fees or overdraft notices. No one was asking me to move money from one account to another, or begging me to just co-sign one last loan. Instead, I woke up to birds outside my window, brewed coffee without checking my phone, and sat on the porch reading a book I'd bought 2 years ago and never opened because I was too busy fixing someone else's emergency. The silence wasn't punishment. It was freedom. Still, there was this ache inside me, a tug of war between peace and heartbreak. I love my kids. That hasn't changed, and it never will. But I had to admit something I'd been running from for years. They didn't love me the way I thought they did. They loved what I did for them, and I had created that dynamic. On the 4th day, I got a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Mr. Hayes, this is Lorna from Oak Street Realty. Sophie listed you as her emergency contact. She's behind on rent 3 months. We need to discuss next steps. 3 months? I sat back in my chair, stunned. Sophie had told me she was just a little short this month. 3 months meant this wasn't an emergency. This was a pattern. My hands trembled as I typed a response. This is not my responsibility. Please discuss directly with Sophie Hayes. My thumb hovered over the send button. For years, I would have taken that call as a personal summons to rescue mode. But now, I pressed send and put the phone face down on the table. A minute later, another message came in, this time from Ethan. Ethan. Sophie says you told her landlord to call her directly. Seriously, Dad? What happened to family having each other's backs? I stared at the text, then typed, family doesn't mean one person carries all the weight. You're both adults. Handle it. I hit send and waited for the storm. That evening, the storm arrived in person. A car screeched to a halt in my driveway, and Ethan climbed out, his face twisted in anger. He slammed the car door so hard I thought the glass might shatter. Sophie followed, her eyes red and puffy from crying. You ruined my life, she said before I could even open my mouth. No, Sophie, I replied quietly. I stopped saving your life for you. Ethan stepped closer, fists clenched. You think you're teaching us some life lesson? All you're doing is proving you don't give a damn about your own kids. I stood my ground. I love you both, but love isn't writing blank checks while you keep digging holes you refuse to climb out of. You don't understand, Sophie shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. I've been trying, Dad, but it's hard out there. Rent is insane. My roommate bailed. What am I supposed to do? Figure it out, I said gently but firmly. Like I did when I was your age. Like your mother and I did when we had nothing but secondhand furniture and a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper. We didn't run home to our parents every time life got hard. That's cruel, Ethan said. You think cutting us off is going to make us better people? No, it's going to make us hate you. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. If you hate me for asking you to stand on your own 2 feet, then maybe we've all been lying to ourselves about what kind of family we really are. Sophie sobbed harder. You're supposed to be my safety net. I took a deep breath. A safety net catches someone who accidentally falls. You've been jumping, Sophie, over and over, knowing I'd catch you. That ends today. They left without another word, Sophie crying in the passenger seat, while Ethan muttered curses under his breath as he drove off. I watched them go, my chest heavy but my resolve solid. For years, I thought keeping the peace meant giving them everything. But sometimes keeping the peace means starting a war, because without conflict, nothing changes. That night, I dug through an old box in my closet. Inside were things I hadn't touched in over a decade. My old hiking boots, a notebook filled with short stories I once dreamed of publishing, and a brochure for an Alaskan cruise my wife and I had planned before she got sick. I sat on the floor, holding that brochure and whispered, Maybe it's time, huh? I booked the cruise that same night. For me. For the man I used to be before I became just Dad the ATM. 2 days later, Sophie called. I almost didn't answer. Dad. Her voice was quieter this time, almost fragile. They're evicting me. A deep silence stretched between us. My old self would have leapt to wire money, to call lawyers, to solve everything. But I gripped the phone tighter and said, "What's your plan?" She sniffled. I don't know. Then that's where you start. Find one. I know it's scary, but you can do it, Sophie. You have to. She didn't respond right away, but when she finally did, her voice had a spark of something I hadn't heard in years resolve. Okay, I'll figure it out. That night, I slept with an ease I hadn't felt in a decade. Maybe my kids hated me right now. Maybe they'd hate me for months. But for the first time, they were facing their problems instead of handing them to me. And for the first time, I was living my life instead of theirs. This was only the beginning. I could feel it. The silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was growth. And for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what came next. The day after Sophie's eviction call, I woke up before dawn. I didn't check my phone, didn't open my laptop, didn't even pour coffee right away. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall. For years, I would have sprung into action by now, calling landlords, wiring money, maybe even offering to move Sophie back in with me. But that part of me was gone, or at least locked away. When I finally checked my phone, there were 37 unread messages. Most were from Sophie. Sophie. They gave me until Friday to clear out. Sophie. I don't know what to do. Sophie. Why are you ignoring me? Sophie. Please, Dad. Just one more time. One last time. The one last time hit me hard. I'd heard it before. Every last time ended up being the first of many. That morning, Ethan called. She's staying with me now, he said, his voice dripping with accusation. Do you feel good about this? Kicking your daughter to the curb like some stranger? I closed my eyes. Ethan, no one kicked her anywhere. She didn't pay her rent for 3 months. That's not on me. You're her father. And she's 25, Ethan. She's old enough to rent an apartment, which means she's old enough to pay for it, or face the consequences when she doesn't. He scoffed. You think you're teaching us some life lesson? You're just done being a dad. That one stung, but I didn't let him hear it. I'm finally being a dad. I spent the rest of the day walking through the old hiking trail behind our neighborhood. It had been years since I set foot there. The air was sharp and cool, the scent of pine heavy and fresh, and for the first time in a long time I felt alive. I thought about my wife, about how she used to remind me that boundaries weren't walls, they were doors, doors that led to growth. I had ignored that advice for 10 years, but now I was finally building those doors. Halfway down the trail, my phone buzzed again. Another call from Sophie. I let it ring out. Then came a text. Sophie, I'm scared. I don't know how to do this. My chest tightened, but I typed back. I know. That's why you need to try. Call your HR department. Ask about temporary housing programs. Sell what you don't need. You can do this. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, she replied. Sophie. Okay, I'll try. I smiled, small but real. That was the first time she had said those words without immediately asking me for money. The real surprise came 2 nights later. I had just sat down to dinner, a simple one this time, soup and bread, when there was a knock at the door. Sophie stood there, her face pale, her eyes tired, but her expression different. Can I come in? She asked softly. Of course. She sat at the table, staring at her hands. I sold my television and my old handbags, got enough for a deposit on a shared place. I blinked. You did that yourself? She nodded. It's not great, but it's something. And I talked to my boss. They're giving me extra shifts. Pride swelled in my chest. Sophie, that's incredible. She looked up, tears in her eyes. I hated you for a few days, you know. I thought you didn't care. But maybe you cared more than I realized. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. I've always cared. I just needed you to see that you can do this on your own. Later that night, Ethan called again. His voice was different too, quieter. I might have been hard on you, he admitted. Sophie told me what she did. I didn't think she had it in her. She always did, I said. You both do. There was a pause. Yeah, I guess I should probably figure out my own stuff too. I smiled, staring at the ceiling. You should, and I'm here if you need advice. but not a bailout. He chuckled lightly. Yeah, I get it. When I went to bed that night, I realized something huge. This wasn't just about teaching them responsibility. This was about rebuilding our family on better terms. I had broken the cycle, and while it hurt, it was starting to pay off. The next morning, I pulled out my old Alaska cruise brochure again. I actually booked it this time, with a departure date 6 months out. For the first time since my wife died, I was thinking about my future, not just theirs. And when I put down the deposit, I felt something lift from my chest that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I wasn't just taking my life back, I was finally living it. It had been 3 weeks since Sophie sold her television and handbags. 3 weeks since Ethan called to apologize. 3 weeks since I started to breathe like a free man. For the first time in over a decade, my life had rhythm: morning coffee on the porch, long walks on the trail, evenings spent reading or writing in my old journal. My phone still buzzed occasionally, but not with demands. Sophie texted updates about her new shared apartment and extra shifts at work. Ethan sent the occasional photo of a car engine or some new project he was doing at the garage. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Then, one morning, Ethan showed up at my door, pale and shaken. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course, come in." He sat heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. I screwed up. Bad. My stomach tightened. "What happened?" He took a deep breath. "I co-signed a loan for a buddy. He bailed. Now they're coming after me." I closed my eyes, fighting back an old reflex to grab my checkbook. "How much?" $8,000. A year ago, I would have transferred that money before breakfast. Today, I leaned back and said, "What's your plan?" He blinked. "Plan? Dad, I'm telling you I'm drowning." "I know, son, and I hate that for you. But I need to hear your plan. What are you going to do about it?" He stared at me for a long time, jaw tight. "You're really not going to help me, are you?" "I am helping you," I said, voice steady. "Just not by writing a check. I'm helping you figure out how to fix it yourself." Ethan left angry. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way he slammed the car door. But beneath the anger, I saw something else: fear. Yes, but also thought. He wasn't running to another quick solution. He was actually thinking. That was new. A few days later, Sophie called. "Dad, guess what?" she said, her voice brighter than I'd heard in years. "I paid my rent early this month." Early? I've never done that before. Pride swelled in my chest. "That's amazing, Sophie. How's the new place?" "It's tiny and my roommate leaves dishes in the sink, but it's mine, you know. I did this myself." "That's the best feeling in the world." "It really is," she said softly. Then after a pause, "Dad, I'm sorry I said those things. About Mom, about you not caring." I swallowed hard. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." That night, as I sat on the porch under a blanket of stars, I thought about how much had changed in just a month. Sophie was standing on her own 2 feet. Ethan was facing his first real test without my safety net. And me? I was finally planning something for myself. The Alaska cruise. I'd started looking at excursions, glacier hikes, wildlife tours, even one of those ridiculous helicopter rides that land on ice fields. I could almost hear my wife's laugh in my head, teasing me for being such a tourist. 3 days later, Ethan called. "I talked to the bank," he said. His voice was calmer this time. "They're willing to work out a payment plan. It's going to be tight, but I can handle it if I pick up extra hours." I smiled, gripping the phone tighter. "That's exactly what you should do." He hesitated. "I was mad at you, Dad. Thought you were just abandoning me. But I get it now. You're not bailing me out because you believe I can handle it, right?" "Exactly." There was a long pause, then, "Thanks for believing in me, even when I didn't." That night, I went to bed with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My kids weren't perfect, neither was I. But for the first time, we were all moving forward on our own paths. I glanced at the Alaska brochure on my nightstand, smiled, and whispered to myself, "Next stop, living my life." 6 months later, I was standing on the deck of an Alaskan cruise ship, the wind sharp and clean against my face. The water stretched endlessly, dark and cold, broken only by the towering presence of glaciers that looked like they had been carved by gods. I tightened my jacket and smiled. I had actually done it. I had booked the trip, packed my bags, and left. For once, I was doing something just for me, not as Dad the problem solver, not as the walking ATM, but as Daniel Hayes, a man who had earned the right to live. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy. After Sophie's eviction scare, and Ethan's loan disaster, both kids had gone through rough patches, but something beautiful had happened. They adapted. Sophie took extra shifts, learned to cook her own meals, and even started a savings account, her own savings account. She texted me one day. Guess who bought groceries without using a credit card? This girl. I had smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Ethan, for his part, picked up more hours at the garage and even started an evening certification course to expand his skills. One night he called to say, "Dad, I'm tired, broke, and sore, but I'm doing this on my own, and I'm proud of that." For the first time in years, I didn't feel fear when I thought about their futures. I felt pride. The night before my trip, they both showed up at my house, unannounced but smiling this time. Sophie carried a cake with Bon Voyage written in shaky icing, and Ethan handed me a brand new set of travel headphones. "We wanted to say, thank you," Sophie said, eyes glossy, "for not giving up on us, even when we hated you for it." I swallowed hard. "I never hated you, sweetheart. I hated what I allowed to happen to us. But that's behind us now." Ethan nodded. "You were right, Dad. We needed to learn, and we did." We ate that cake in the same dining room, where months ago I had said no for the first time. The difference was, this time, there was laughter, not the shallow kind fueled by denial, but the real kind that comes when people finally understand one another. And now here I was, cruising past glaciers with strangers, snapping pictures and laughing around me, feeling my wife's memory like a warm hand on my shoulder. I whispered to her, "We did it, love. The kids are okay, and I'm finally okay too." I closed my eyes and let the wind carry the weight off my chest. The weight I had carried for so long, thinking I had to fix everything to keep my family together. Turns out, sometimes the best way to hold on is to let go. When I returned home a week later, tanned from the Alaskan sun and sore from hiking on glaciers, Sophie was waiting with a proud smile and a hug that lasted longer than any we'd shared in years. "Dad, I got promoted," she said, grinning. "I'm moving into my own apartment next month. No roommates." Ethan walked in right after, wiping grease from his hands. "I paid off half that loan already. Should be free and clear in 6 months." I hugged them both and laughed a deep, genuine laugh that felt like it came from my soul. "You two have no idea how proud I am." Sophie looked at me seriously. "You started all of this, Dad. If you hadn't stopped bailing us out, we wouldn't be here." Ethan nodded. "You saved us by stopping saving us." I smiled, my throat tight with emotion. "No, you saved yourselves, and that's the best thing I could have ever hoped for." That night, we had dinner together again. No bailouts, no hidden agendas, just family. And as I looked around that table, I realized something. This was what I'd been missing. A family built not on dependency, but on respect.